everybody, it's your pal JR, and welcome to Assume I'm an Idiot, where we take complicated topics and break them down into tiny, fun-sized bites that a 7-year-old can understand. I am the idiot.
You are a stupid man!
And on this podcast, we'll be exploring everything from silly fun facts that everyone should know to bigger, more adult stuff like the economy, animals, the universe, the legal system, and so much more. Broken down without corporate talk or industry speak so that even an adult like me can digest it. So sit back, steep yourself in green tea, and prepare to downshift your brain back to the 5th grade as we learn how stuff works from an imbecile's perspective. We have a super interesting and somewhat topical issue to discuss today that I think is going to surprise a lot of people. But first, it's time for Random Stuff You Should Know.
Random stuff you should know.
Today, we're pulling from the world of sports.
Rick 'em, rack 'em, heart attack 'em, shoot, baby, do. What's the one thing that JR can't do? Sports. Yeah!
Did you know that professional golfer, 6-time major winner Lee Trevino, was struck by lightning during a tournament? Not once, but twice. In 1975, during the Western Open, Trevino was struck by lightning while waiting for play to resume after a storm. He sustained light injuries that required some surgery. After the incident, he continued to play golf, even winning 8 more times on the PGA Tour, including the PGA Championship in 1984. Then, he was struck by lightning again during a Champions Tour event in 1989. To put that in context, the odds of getting struck by lightning are roughly 1 in 15,000. The odds of getting struck twice are 1 in 9 million. He famously said, if you're ever caught on a golf course during a storm and are afraid of lightning, hold up a 1-iron, because not even God can hit a 1-iron. If you're a golfer like me, that joke is very funny. Also from the world of sports,
Yay! Go team! Go!
in the recorded history of baseball, there have been an estimated 23,000 players, plus or minus. And in all that time, there has only been one player named Liam Hendricks. He's a 36-year-old right-handed pitcher who played with the Boston Red Sox. So for you bar trivia people, hold on to that one for the win. You'll thank me one day. Okay, on to the main topic. And the reason this topic came to mind is a few weeks ago I was talking with some friends, and somehow or other, the subject of the national debt came up, which was odd because I'm not one to talk politics in mixed company. During the discussion, as everyone was throwing in unsubstantiated numbers of what the national debt is, one of my friends said, "So what? What difference does it make how big the debt is?" And honestly, I didn't have a response. Yeah, come to think of it, what difference does the national debt make? So it started me down a rabbit hole of trying to understand the impact of the U.S. debt on average people like me, though some people would call me below average. What I found was a mishmash of complicated statistics, math story problems, and industry acronyms that made me feel almost as though the experts out there, used in quotation marks, were just making it up as they went along, that maybe they really don't know. Which of course made my somewhat conspiracy brain think, maybe nobody wants people to understand what the debt means. Are the numbers getting thrown around actually impacting anything? Is it political posturing and talking points? And I'll admit I feel a little ashamed that I, and I think most people, don't really understand how the global economy really works. When you're talking about numbers in the multiple trillions of dollars, at what point does it just become fake monopoly money? Set aside trillions, plural, and let's talk about the number 1 trillion. I've talked about this before on a couple of episodes. I think nearly everyone of basic intelligence can understand the number 1 million. 1 million is a comprehensible number. 1,000,000. I believe people can grasp that. Certainly less people can truly comprehend 1 billion, 1,000 million, but some people can. I think very, very few people really understand the number 1 trillion. A trillion is an impossibly large number. Most people, if you ask them to visualize 1 trillion of something, no matter what it is, a trillion marbles, would vastly underestimate what that looks like. The best way I have to understand what a trillion really means is to think of it this way. Let's say you're lucky enough that you need to spend $1 trillion. If you started spending $1 million per day, the day Jesus was born, year 0 for all the Christians out there, $365 million per year, you would still be spending $1 million a day for the next 715 years. At $1 million per day, it would take you 2,740 years to spend $1 trillion. And even that example doesn't really clarify it. So when we're talking about the current national debt, as of today, somewhere around $39 trillion all in, the number becomes so incomprehensible, it's almost imaginary. And as an aside, don't even get me started on the number of stars in the universe, estimated at 200 billion trillion. That's 200 sextillion stars. That number shouldn't even exist. I hear that number and I get a nosebleed, but that has nothing to do with this. Once you've reached a number that large, 38 trillion, does it matter anymore? How does it actually affect the day-to-day life of the average American? And what would happen if it was suddenly completely paid off? What would that mean to you and me? Well, because of my well-documented disdain for math of any kind, I am thrilled to have someone joining me to help sort out this whole mess. He's the department head of the social studies program at a prestigious private school in Austin, Texas, who he very politely asked me not to mention by name, and given the reputation of this show, I don't blame him. He holds a BA in political science, specializing in foreign policy and international relations. Also, government economics falls in line with that BA in political science, so it's all over the map. He has a BS in computer science, and he's just a really nice guy. A very idiot welcome to Dawson Harrington.
Thanks for having me on, John. Are you having a nice day?
So far, so good. I can't complain except for the heat. It's nasty out there. Thanks so much for joining us today via the futuristic magic of Zoom technology. You're in Austin, Texas, correct?
That is correct.
Is it the gates of Hades there right now? Because it is here.
It is disgusting outside. I'm currently without car air conditioning too, so I just
Oh my
drive
God.
home as fast as possible.
Just sit in a cold tub. There's no reason to
Yeah,
go anywhere
absolutely.
if that's the case. Do people call you Mr. Harrington or do they call you Dawson?
It depends on the school. Right now is a first name school, which honestly feels better. It was weird being Mr. Harrington.
I'd like that better because if I have to call you Mr. Harrington, I'm going to feel like I'm back in school and it's automatically giving me like a weird feeling in my back. So I don't want to do that. So is Dawson
Sure.
okay then?
Dawson is great.
Terrific. You have been teaching in Austin for about 5 years. Tell me a little bit about that, how you ended up there and how long have you been there and so forth.
It's actually a pretty funny story. I like most people my age, COVID eliminated the job market entirely.
Oh yeah.
So I started substitute teaching just for, income.
Yeah.
And I'm at a high school one day and the principal starts chatting with me and basically says, "Do you know how to do math?" And I said, "Yeah, as much as like the next person." And they hired me that day. Teaching.
That's amazing, really?
Yeah, it's maybe one of the luckiest things that's ever happened to me. And
So-
then I just never stopped teaching.
Is it because you had that government economics thing attached to your degree?
Definitely. And I think it helped that I'm in Austin and we're such a UT town.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was only about a year. And then I switched over to private and
Are you
been
born
ever since.
Are you born and bred Texas or did you go there from another state?
I don't say this often to Texans because I was born in San Francisco.
Okay. Oh, really?
But
Okay.
Yeah, we only lived there for about 2 years. So
okay.
I consider myself mostly Texan.
Okay. All right. For better or worse. That's no commentary on anything. So I think I kind of asked it, but how did poli-sci turn into economics for you? I mean, aside from the job offer, I mean, how do those two things relate?
I'm not sure how it is in other states, but in the state of Texas, if you teach government, you also teach economics.
Okay.
It's 1 semester each for the senior year social studies.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I like this anecdote, but political science and economics used to be the same discipline until around 1900.
Oh, okay. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was just called political economy. But as the modern market economy became more and more complex and the mathematics increased, it was sort of a necessity that it's its own discipline.
Okay. That's cool. I didn't know that. Well, you have not been on this show before, and if you're lucky, you haven't even heard the show before. But it's pretty relaxed, just a nice conversation. I am here, however, to be schooled. Okay. So that said, if you start to get too hoity-toity, you're going to get one of these. Okay. That means slow your
Right.
roll, ease back the throttle, dumb it down for an idiot like me. Okay.
I mean, this is a huge advantage. Most of my day is explaining something to a captive audience. So having someone that wants to know about it is like a huge advantage.
Well, I don't know that I'm going to absorb it, but I want to know about it. I mean, there's a big difference, I think. Right. So in my intro, I was talking about the current national debt, which is 39 trillion. Without a doubt, it's going to be at 40 trillion by the end of the year, probably the fall. just because of the war. This is an apolitical show. We don't talk politics. We don't point fingers. But under the current administration, there are wars going on, and that debt is going to rise. So given the size of the current national debt, at what point does it just not matter anymore?
I mean, 39 trillion is insane. It's a staggering number that is almost impossible to conceptualize. I'm
Yeah.
not sure that I could picture a trillion of anything, let
Yeah.
alone 39 trillion.
How about it? Yeah.
And interestingly, it does matter to the consumer, but in a roundabout way, not as much as one might expect. At the national level, absolutely, because you could see certain destabilizing effects.
Yeah.
Day to day, it absolutely has some effects that we'll get into, but I do think there is a bit of I don't want to say alarmist, because it is worth having an alarm for.
Yeah.
But I think the more people learn about the national debt, the more at ease they may feel.
So, I mean, when it's a number like 39 trillion, 39.7 or whatever the number was, in my mind, I say, well, it might as well be 100 trillion. What's the difference? In my feeble brain says there's no way we could ever pay that off, right? The interest alone on that is somewhere around the area of $2 trillion a year, right? To pay off just the interest. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But there's a point where it just sounds to me like it becomes monopoly money. It's just fake money. And it just doesn't feel like it. I'm sure there's an impact on, and we'll talk about that. I'm sure there's an impact on John Q. consumer. But to me, what's the difference between 25 trillion and 39 trillion? You know what I'm saying? In terms of how that impacts us.
Very little. I think you're actually hitting the nail on the head there.
All right. I'm going to give myself a ding there.
Nice. Yeah, well-earned ding. Because it is increased so much in just my lifespan.
Okay. Yeah, me too.
And in the time that we've been talking, I had to do some math earlier, so I wrote this down. It has actually increased by around $5 million.
Since we started talking today.
Since we've started, yes.
Oh my
That's
God.
actually the conservative estimate.
Holy
It could very well
smokes.
be much more.
Yeah.
I mean, the United States is in a very interesting position, given that we're essentially the global superpower and the major reserve currency.
Yeah.
So I think the traditional economic rules that govern maybe some smaller countries, I don't want to say that they don't apply to us. That sounds kind of egotistical. I just mean that it works a little bit differently.
Okay.
In terms of, who owns the debt, I think is a big question too. And it's kind of a surprising answer that actually we do.
Is that right?
Yeah. So about 70% of the national debt is actually held by either Americans or American governmental entities.
That is, I don't know how to wrap my head around that. So we're borrowing money from ourselves is what you're saying.
If we could take a second, I can explain a little bit on how the debt is issued. I think that would be
Please, God,
helpful.
do. Yes.
Sure. So most of the debt is U.S. Treasury bonds, which is a major money-making apparatus for the government.
Okay.
And so being a bond, it's an investment, and different entities all across the world invest in our treasury bonds.
Okay.
This has changed a little bit in the last 20 years or so, but they are traditionally one of the safest investments money can buy,
Okay.
which helps us quite a bit. But yeah, so all over America, pensions, different investment firms, mutual funds, all invest in United States Treasury bonds.
Okay.
So, and shockingly, I didn't know this until I started teaching. A major buyer of U.S. Treasury bonds is actually the Federal Reserve.
Okay. That's weird.
So
yeah.
it is weird.
Yeah.
A major part of our government essentially owes another major part of our government money.
Okay, so this gets back to where it gets all squirrely, because this gets back to when I worked in-house at an in-house creative department for a bigger company, right? So I worked for the Discovery Channel, and I worked in the in-house creative department, and there was always this budget stuff where we were talking about, we don't have the money to do that, but this department has the money to do that. And I'm like, okay, explain that to me. Like, why? It's all inside money. It's all our own money. We might as well just print our own face on the money because it's just our money. So what do you mean we can't afford to do this or that, kind of thing? This is where this falls for me. Again, my addled brain will not process this kind of math, but it seems to me like the Federal Reserve is borrowing money from another government entity. Does that mean that government entity is also like setting the interest rate and stuff?
That's a great question. The interest rate with the treasury bonds is a little bit different than, like, say, the Federal Reserve interest rate,
Okay.
which I think is the one that we're always really worried about.
Yeah.
For mortgages and such. The interest rate on the treasury bonds is more so set by I'm not sure what word to use, almost sort of like a bid and then the secondhand market.
Okay.
And it's a little bit less that the Federal Reserve buys these bonds directly from the Treasury. They will buy them back off the open market to achieve their Federal Reserve mandate of, interest management and like inflation control, stuff of that
I'm
nature.
giving you one of these.
That's fair.
That was gobbledygook to me. So let's go back. Let's start that again. So in terms of the interest rate, it's not set the same by the Fed doesn't set it, is what you're saying. Okay.
That is correct.
So it's set by what's the benchmark or what's the mechanism?
There isn't really a standard. Think of it as a bidding war.
Okay.
Between investment
That's better. Yeah.
companies. And then the Federal Reserve will buy those bonds as sort of a separate thing to do money supply control things.
Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense to me. Thank you for explaining that. The national debt, from what I understand, is 123% of the GDP. I did a whole episode on the GDP and what that is and why it's important.
Oh, nice.
It surpassed it for the first time since World War II, from what I understand, or from what my research showed me. Very pedestrian research, admittedly. But what does that mean in terms of, okay, right now it's 123% of the GDP. If it was 70% of the GDP, what does that impact to me as a consumer?
I think that's what we're all worried about.
Okay.
So the actual amount, I think the figure of it surpassing the GDP is super alarming. And just in the sense of, World War II is World War II. There's like very good reason to be spending that money.
Sure.
Especially coming out of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Today, I think a lot of Americans would see that and maybe wonder why.
Yeah.
Why are we spending that kind of money?
Yeah.
The real number I think that is useful to focus on is more so the interest on the debt.
Right.
The debt being as high as it is, I think the real alarm there is that means that the interest is becoming quite extreme.
So I was using 5% as sort of a nice round number to calculate what the interest was on the national debt, which is $2 trillion a year, which on its own is an incomprehensible number for most people. So I don't know what the actual interest rate is. And I guess the question is that we'll never touch the principal as far as I can tell. And, is that a compound interest? And what's the difference between a compound interest and a non-compound interest and so on? Can you clear that up for me?
Definitely. This is a really good question for the national debt because it works a little bit differently than I think our brains are trying to think about interest.
Yeah.
When we issue those bonds that comprise so much of the debt, basically each batch of treasury bonds that gets released will have a different interest rate, kind of depending on the economic needs of the moment.
Okay.
Furthermore, as those bonds expire, a lot of times we'll reissue new bonds to pay for the old ones, which they themselves might have different interest rates.
Okay. So how is it all calculated into one lump interest rate?
So yeah, when you do the math on it, next year we're projected to spend about 3.3% of our GDP on the debt.
On the interest alone?
Yes, which makes up to be 18% of federal revenue in its entirety.
Holy smokes. And that doesn't get anywhere near the principal. That is just the interest rate.
Absolutely. No, it's an unfortunate situation.
Wow. Well, let me back up for 1 second. Let me ask you, we talked about if monopoly money and does it matter or not? Okay. Once the number hits this number, is the national debt right now more of a political talking point versus a genuine issue that we need to tackle? I guess that's a two-part question. Meaning, what happens if we just let it go and go and go and go and go?
Sure. We'll start with the political angle.
Yeah.
I think we're hearing about it extra right now because of the impending midterms.
Right.
Which will happen again in another 2 years with the presidential election.
Right.
Something pretty consistently you'll see in campaign season is whatever the non-incumbent party is, the party running for office is going to talk a lot about the national debt.
Right.
But pretty consistently over the last few decades, the national debt is like a nonpartisan thing.
Oh,
it's pretty consistent amongst presidencies to have the national debt increase.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you go back even just a couple of years, Biden's went up by $8 trillion. Trump's first administration went up by 7.8. Obama's went up by 9.3 trillion, and so on and so on. The numbers just keep getting bigger because the number they're starting with keeps getting bigger. But in terms of the percentage that it's going up, it's relatively consistent across the board. It's not a partisan thing. It's just every president inherits a debt and they add a certain percentage to it, and they all are pretty close to the same.
Mm-hmm. And, the real, I think, danger at the heart of this is as that interest payment climbs to be more and more of our governmental revenue, that just means there's less for other things, unless we want to add to the debt even more.
Right. And again, that brings me back to the question of what's the downside of just adding to the debt and keep adding to the debt. Since we owe ourselves, see, now one thing you told me that, it's like, well, let me go back for a second first. Before we get into that, let me ask, okay, so 70% of the national debt is owned by the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Who owns the other 30?
Okay, I'm glad you asked because I have some hard numbers for us.
Go.
And before I say this, we should keep in mind 30% of almost $40 trillion is still like,
Yeah, it's a significant amount of
immense.
money. That's not pocket change.
I was surprised by the highest. I looked it up for this year. It's actually Japan.
Really?
I didn't expect that. Yeah, Japan owns $1.4 trillion of our national debt.
Okay.
Second place is the United Kingdom at just around $1 trillion.
Okay.
And third place is China at about $6.5 billion, which is, I think, less than most people would expect. I certainly expected China to have more of that.
Oh, me too. I thought you were going to say 15% of it was China. So that's really interesting.
You would expect.
So that, that makes up, that doesn't make up the whole 30, but those are the top three.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then from there, it's incredible smattering of just about every country on the planet.
Now, if we're borrowing from them, they can set their own interest rate, correct?
Sort of. It's basically that they buy these bonds from us, and those bonds are set at an interest rate that's fixed.
Okay.
Once that bond matures and they go to buy new bonds, that's when you kind of have that element of bidding.
Okay, I got you. I understand. That makes sense. Let me remember what the initial part of that question was. Oh, because I was saying that we owe ourselves, right? We owe ourselves the money. So if we don't pay ourselves back the money, what happens? I mean, I understand the idea of the value of the dollar globally and that kind of thing, but I'm taking it from my own standpoint of, and forget about stuff like gas prices because that's dictated by something else, but just inflation and those kind of things. How is that affected by how big the national debt is?
So there's kind of two ways to think about it. First is trust, and then the other is money supply.
Okay.
So I think trust is a good place to start.
Okay.
A huge part of the way that our country is able to sort of stay so firmly ahead economically is the trust in our institutions and banking and these treasury bonds we're speaking of.
Yeah.
The concern lies in that if we start overdoing it, there could come a moment where we lose some of that trust. And it's not a fixed number. That's why it's kind of hard to speculate on. It really is. I joke with my students sometimes that the economy is largely vibes based.
Yeah.
This is a good example of that. If people start to get squirrely about our ability to pay that debt back, even Americans, it could sort of start a chain reaction that collapses it. We've actually recently, back in 2011, our debt rating got downgraded.
Yes.
Which I remember was a huge deal. And that was only one of the reporting agencies. I forget which one, but as of now, several more of the reporting agencies have downgraded us.
Okay.
So it seems to be moving that direction. And, we're still rated really highly comparatively.
Right.
But if that trend, continues over decades, we might not be able to use this lever anymore.
Who outrates us? Who's got a higher rating than us right now?
That's a great question. Most of Scandinavia,
really,
for reasons I'd like to talk about a little bit later, they do something kind of interesting with their country finance. Germany and Switzerland.
Wow. We're getting conquered by that part of Europe over there.
Singapore.
In Singapore? That was when I would expect. Singapore, I would completely expect, but Germany,
for sure.
But Germany and that part of the world, I would never have expected. So before we start getting into that kind of stuff, let's do a little historic background. There was a point where the national debt was zero. Andrew Jackson paid off the national debt to zero in 1835. It only lasted a year. Then we had to borrow again right after that because there was a crash in 37 or a depression in 37. A recession? Let's call it a recession. But it was considered bad by a lot of people. And is it because of that credit worthiness that you were talking about? Like you should have some debt?
The system that we understand it, or the system as we understand it, didn't super exist back then.
Okay.
I do think it kind of comes down to that idea of there isn't really like a perfectly balanced budget that exists in real life.
Okay.
This was firmly into like the capitalist era.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't really much of a need to necessarily have massive currency reserves.
Okay, gotcha.
So I think their thinking was that it was best to use that money or a little bit more to do, stuff.
Okay,
they needed.
for the betterment of the country and so forth. I mean, there wasn't a huge
Investments.
military need
Mhm.
in 1835 from my horrible history lessons have taught me, but I don't think there was anything militarily going on in 1835, correct?
Nothing at the scale that would necessitate a debt like that.
Okay. So, I mean, the idea that a lot of, and again, that might have been political posturing, but a lot of people were considering that the national debt was zero was a bad thing. I mean, I'm not 100% clear on that. So why would it be considered bad to have zero debt?
But if you have zero debt, you could be spending a little more money and kind of reinvesting it into the
Okay.
economy.
I got
And
you.
especially back then, it's not the America that we know. Much more of like a isolated, far off place that wasn't super connected to the global economy in
Okay.
the way that we would expect it to be.
All right. So we were being too conservative by a lot of people's standards, is what you're saying. We weren't using money like we should have, or we weren't paying for other services, et cetera.
I think you could make that argument.
I did make that argument. I just did. We had in 98, 99, we had a budget surplus, right? That was under Clinton, if I remember correctly. But my research is showing that having a budget surplus is not the same as paying off the national debt. And why on earth is that?
Sure. I mean, fundamentally, the surplus is best thought of as like a year over year thing,
Okay.
where if you have a little bit more money, it'll go to the surplus. And then depending on the administration, that surplus may or may not be used to pay off the debt.
Okay. So this is getting math squirrely again for me. I'm going to give you,
I gotcha.
I'm giving you one of those, and I'm going to give you,
He doesn't understand. Explain as you would a child.
so we have a surplus, which most people would go, yay, we have a surplus, but it's not the same as paying off the debt because talk to me like I'm 7. Why is it not the same?
Sure. It's almost like having two bank accounts, right?
Okay.
And the surplus bank account is just 1 year at a time and it resets every time.
Okay.
And then the national debt bank account is the forever one.
Okay.
And so that, surplus bank account being in the green is great and it gives you a lot of flexibility, but there's no one forcing them to transfer that money to the other one.
That I understand. Okay. So it really is, maybe there's need a different term for it, because it feels like when you say a surplus, it means the debt is zero and we have this much money left over. That's, if I have a surplus in my house, that means I don't owe anybody anything and I have an extra $100 laying around. So maybe they need a different word for that.
Yeah. I mean, it is like, I think going back to that political posturing,
Mm-hmm.
it is probably one of the best things a politician could be able to say is that they have a surplus.
Right.
And then, don't worry about the rest. Don't think about it.
Right. Look over here at the jingly keys instead of over.
Mhm.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So let's say we suddenly find that the U.S. is sitting on the world's largest diamond and unobtainium deposit in the galaxy. And so we are flush and we can pay off the national debt. Then what? What impact does that have to me as a consumer, as a citizen of the U.S., whatever?
So basically, the treasury bond, I think this is an unsatisfactory answer, maybe. We would still,
I'll be the judge, but go ahead.
we would still almost for sure take on debt.
Okay.
We would absolutely pay a lot of it off.
Okay.
And what that would do to not just us, but the world, because this is where economics gets so complicated. You might need someone with a PhD to fully explore that
Okay.
train of thought. But from my understanding, assuming we keep issuing the treasury bonds, but probably less, and we pay off the rest,
Okay.
that would probably lead to some pretty intense inflation
Really?
because we've flooded several markets with American dollars.
Okay. So meaning we've paid back Germany, we've paid back Singapore and so forth. And so they've got a big influx and that affects our inflation?
I guess maybe more so inflation at the global level of
Okay.
American dollars.
Okay, gotcha.
And this was actually researched in, I want to say the 30s or the 40s, when the national debt first started getting really big.
Yeah.
A lot of economic thinkers were figuring out, okay, if we can get our act together and pay this off, what does that mean?
Right.
And they didn't land on like one answer necessarily, but we would need to figure out new ways to attract investors into the US government.
So is borrowing money either from ourselves or from foreign entities I get what you're saying. I'm trying to articulate it for myself. So borrowing money from other countries and borrowing money from ourselves actually keeps global inflation down.
I'd like to slightly amend that.
Okay.
I think it might be more useful to think of it in terms of not necessarily inflation, but demand for American money.
Yeah. Okay. I got you.
Because
I got you.
they'll have more. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It would just be a different paradigm.
Okay.
And I think if we enter a world, like let's say tomorrow, it really does get to the breaking point where we're no longer trusted to pay it back. Everything starts falling down.
Right.
And then we find that unobtainium and we're like, oh,
Thank
thank goodness we
goodness.
can pay this off.
Yeah.
We would pay it off for sure. We would then need to figure out a new way to stimulate demand for our money.
Okay. I got you. And that does not, I mean, this gets into a whole nother inflation discussion about, printing money and how much do we print and do we hold off on printing more since we're flush and flooding the world with American dollars. But it does lead to an interesting question about the strength of the dollar around the world versus the strength within our own borders. And the why I'm asking that question is I think there's, in the conversation I was having with the friends that started this whole thing, sparked this whole topic, where I really didn't have an answer when he said, who cares how big the national debt is? I was like, yeah, who does care? I don't understand it at all. But one of the things that we were talking about was, well, it'll make the American dollar strong. And I'm like, and continue the sentence. And he's like, well, that means prices will go down. I'm like, are we to believe in any way, shape, or form that if suddenly the dollar was strong, Americans had more money to spend, that companies would suddenly drop all their prices? Because my conspiracy theory brain, how's that,
Sure.
says absolutely not. If Americans have more money, companies go, great, we can charge whatever dollar amount we want for this, because this goes back to the gas shortage in the 70s. And then when we hit the 80s and everybody was suddenly flush with money, whether they were borrowing it poorly or not, people didn't care how much gas costs. They couldn't have cared less. That's why electric cars sort of died off in the 80s, because people were like, yeah, I don't care how much gas costs. Like, they can charge me whatever. I got money coming out of every orifice. And gas stations and the oil companies were charging a ridiculous amount of money, all relatively speaking, of course. If you look back and see, there was 89 cents a gallon or something like that. But the whole idea was they could charge whatever they wanted because we had money. I think, and you can argue with me, that maybe that's going to be that would be the case again, don't you think?
I definitely think people get much more sensitive to all of this stuff when times are hard.
Okay.
And times, are difficult right now. So I think when people see the government spending a ton of money,
Yeah.
it hits them very sideways.
Okay.
But to answer your question more directly, the national debt absolutely has pulleys on the rest of the economy and like how, the average American
Okay.
is performing. But it's kind of abstracted a little bit. There's a lot of intermediary layers, what that might look like for inflation and demand and all of this stuff.
Right.
That said, day to day, I think if we paid off the debt today, magically, miraculously, it could cool down inflation,
Okay.
theoretically, which could, of course, help with consumer prices.
Okay.
But it's very unclear, and this is something I wanted to mention. Well, I'm concerned I'm coming across as defending $39 trillion.
No,
But it's
yeah.
more so we have been operating like this for such a long time that all of our economic tools and metrics and everything kind of rely on this concept.
Okay, I got you. I was thinking the same thing, that maybe we just depend on it as part of the foundation for our economy anyway. I mean,
Absolutely.
there's so many things. It's so weird. I've done an episode on interest rates. I've done an episode on how credit is calculated. I've done an episode on the GDP, and it seems like there ain't nothing that doesn't affect our economy. I mean, everything has some effect on our economy that's got to compound on each other and layer to a point where it's like even a PhD would have like, okay, it's hard to separate what's affecting what, meaning, okay, does paying off the national debt or paying down the national debt? Let's just say paying down, because paying off just is a pipe dream. It's ridiculous. It's la la land. So we pay down the national debt. Does that bring down interest rates?
This is a good question. I need to really follow it through.
Okay.
If paying down that national debt can help reduce inflation, which is already a big if, but if we assume that,
Mhm.
one of the larger reasons we see interest rate hikes at all is trying to fight inflation.
Okay.
So that would necessitate, or the Federal Reserve would not feel the need to keep interest rates nearly as high if inflation was low.
Okay. See, now I always thought that when times are tough and inflation was going up, that the Fed drops the rate to encourage lending and encourage people to spend. Do I have that backwards?
It's kind of both are true.
Okay.
So
Of
this
course it is.
actually-
Of course, because we're the U.S. and everything's crazy.
Yeah, you can never get a straight answer.
Yeah.
It kind of is a conflict between traditional wisdom and what people need immediately.
Okay.
And I think COVID actually is maybe the best example of this we could ever hope for.
Okay.
Generally, when interest rates go up, we will see a correlation with inflation reducing.
Okay.
But it's a little bit more roundabout. Generally, for the control of the cycle of the economy, we can either have expansionary policies to help the economy grow or contractionary to help the economy shrink.
Okay. Those are big, nasty words.
Basically, we can either purposefully help or hurt the economy.
Okay. That's better.
And a lot of people, I know my students are like, why would we hurt the economy? Basically to control inflation.
Okay.
Because when I think we saw this through the 2010s, the economy was doing relatively well, especially in tech. And the interest rates were extremely low to keep that growth going.
Right.
But right when the government would traditionally start to kind of tamper off to help stop inflation from going crazy, COVID happened and everything was thrown into the air at once. And there was a lot of concern about the entire economy coming down.
But
so
the early 2010s, that wasn't a response to like the tech bubble bursting, right? Because that was in the 90s, correct? So what was in the early 2010s, what was causing the economy to be in quote unquote relatively good shape? I mean, what was the catalyst?
maybe looks better in hindsight, because I know at the time it didn't necessarily feel that way. But after the 2008 recession,
Okay.
the government employed all of its tools to grow,
Okay.
right? Such as cutting interest rates.
Okay.
And when the time basically came to turn that off, COVID destroyed many things. And so they doubled down.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I understand. All right. So that puts us into the land of where do we go from here, right? It feels like there's not a whole lot that you and I can do to help pay off the national debt. Or am I wrong? Is there some kind of, should I be saving this? Should I be investing in this? Like, what is something that I could do as a consumer? And the answer might be zippity doo dah, but what is something I could do that actually would have any kind of effect on paying that down?
Did I give you a good answer for the last one? I'm worried I lost track of the answer or what we were looking for.
I thought it was okay.
Okay, cool. No, I'm cool with that. Sometimes I think when I slip into teaching mode,
Yeah.
I'll just start sort of weaving around
believe
and
me,
I
I
lose
bet-
it myself.
I bounce all over the place. That's, again, my feeble brain doing that. But what I was talking about was you want to do something to help, or you feel like, wow, this is just spinning out of control. And believe me, there are a lot of people out there, including some of the people I was talking to that sparked this, that couldn't have cared less. They were just like, whatever, the debt, who cares? And I don't disagree with them in that line of thinking. It's easy to think that, but I'm on the other side of like, okay, what do we do about this? And how do I help do something?
I forget the exact figure, but someone did the math on it at one point or another. And I think basically, if you think of it as a household by household thing, we would all need to pay about $120,000.
Okay. All right.
So if only
A year, in 1 year.
I believe so, but I need to fact check
Okay.
myself.
So in that case, no, because then you're talking about a tax hike that's ridiculous, obviously. But, obviously we have, and it's also political, and I try not to get into it, but the whole thing about like, taxing billionaires and how much do they pay and how much do corporations pay and how much do churches pay and so on and so forth. There's a logic there, whether you agree with it or not. There's a logic there that if you start taxing these companies like you would tax any other person in the country, that the national debt would go away pretty damn quickly, or at least get paid down pretty damn quickly.
Sure. And, like you said, without getting too political, I think the three real workable options, if our goal is to eliminate this, or at least pay it down significantly, you either really need to cut government spending, increase government revenue, or the third nuclear option, which no one would want, but inflate it away.
Oh, really?
With
like
with
make everything
hyperinflation.
so expensive that we pay it off that way? Is that what you're?
Yeah, but that's a non-serious answer. That would be, not great. But it's worked for other countries just on accident. They didn't try and inflate it away. But
I mean, obviously, the idea of just cut government spending is it's a non-starter anymore. Like just saying those words, you'll get pitchforks and torches from both sides, marching in the streets. What was the second one you said though? So option one was cutting spending. Now option two was what?
Increasing revenue. Which,
okay. How do you do that? That sounds like a real easy thing.
Unfortunately.
Well,
taxes.
Oh, taxes. Okay.
Taxation.
Okay.
And that's like a non-popular answer.
Yeah, no one wants that.
So there really, unfortunately, is not an easy solution unless we find the unobtainium.
Yeah, let's start digging. I say if we're going to spend any more government money, we should put it into start digging for unobtainium. Actually, I was doing an episode about space, and there's a planet out there it rains diamonds. It's so carbon heavy, it rains diamonds. And I'm like, let's capture that effer and bring it down here. Like,
absolutely.
Maybe that'll help us out.
Yeah, we just have to get there first. We can do another space race.
And then I got to say, then of course there's a downside. Then maybe diamonds wouldn't be valuable anymore because we have so much diamond.
Exactly the right amount a year.
Exactly the right amount.
To the rest.
Exactly. You wanted to go back and talk about something that was happening in Switzerland or Sweden? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of countries that are a little bit more cash flow positive than us, and they still have national debt. I'm not sure that any country in the world does not have at least a little bit of debt of some kind. But countries that tend to bring in a lot of money, typically through resource wealth, like Saudi Arabia and Norway from oil, they start something called a sovereign wealth fund.
Okay.
Which is essentially an investment portfolio controlled by the government. And they operate just like any investment firm ever.
Okay.
But it's public. And it can generate fairly massive amounts of extra money. And that's a big way that they're able to pay for some of these social programs.
Right.
Without having, their taxes are higher, but nothing insane.
Right.
And I think the cool thing about these funds is that you don't necessarily need to not have debt to start one. I think this could be an option for America. We have a significant amount of natural resources and we do make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I think in the short term, it would mean having a little bit less for other things. But a solid sovereign wealth fund can really help to offset taxes.
Well, we don't have a lot of exports though, do we?
I guess non-traditionally, our economy is so service heavy. We would need to maybe figure out a way to incorporate that into the system.
Okay. It's interesting because I think deep down everybody knows that higher taxes are sort of going to be the answer. You don't want to think it, but you know that it's there. And everybody talks about lowering taxes, and then I always ask, well, how are you paying for things? That's how firemen get paid. That's how policemen get paid, right? So you're complaining about your dollars, but you're also going to complain when no police show up at your front door. There's a little bit of a give and take here. I guess the question is, there's never been a point where taxes were exceptionally low in the U.S. Am I wrong in that? When I look back and sort of saw, like I was doing the comparison of the GDP versus the national debt and sort of sidetracked and got into a rabbit hole about like when were taxes really low, it's always been kind of in the same range. It's different for every tax. Now we have tax brackets, which we never used to really have, but was there ever a point where taxes were like crazy low and the economy was doing pretty steady? Is there an answer to that?
Overall, not so much, but I think your best bet, if we could time travel and get some low taxes, would be just before the federal income tax in the early 1900s when we were kind of booming a little bit.
Okay. That was Industrial Revolution time kind of thing that was going on. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there was just so much growth. And, there wasn't really this concept of a income tax yet, which sounds nice. But like you said, we do unfortunately need taxes.
Yeah.
In some capacity. And right now, our taxes, I don't mean they should be higher in a political sense. I just mean in like a money sense.
Right.
Mathematically speaking, we should be paying more, but we're not. And that's, I think, a big part of the debt. We're almost financing it.
Are you a believer in the flat tax? I'm a believer in a flat tax.
I would say I go back and forth on it. I think it depends. I think people conceptualize the flat tax sometimes as very low for everyone, or like, more medium for everyone.
Right.
Or really high for everyone. I think that changes it a lot.
Okay. I'm saying let's go 10%. Let's go 10% across the board. Then that's everything. That's every corporation. That's every, I don't want to get into religious stuff, but that's, in my mind, that's churches, that's corporations, that's billionaires. That's, I think we only have one trillionaire, right? We have Elon Musk is one trillionaire, but everyone across the board, 10%. Doesn't that seem like it makes a lot more sense? You know, whenever I see that a company, when you find out that Google or someplace like that has only paid, 1.4% in taxes, and I'm like, well, I'm getting dinged for 33. How do I get that deal? Right. So
10% sounds, well, I would take 10% in a heartbeat for myself.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that would be, we're onto something. We'll call it the J.R. Dawson tax, and we'll put it in front of Congress, and it'll die immediately.
It's all about naming, and that's close. We could name it something maybe like the Free America tax.
Oh, okay. I like where you're
the
going with
freedom
that.
tax. Any number of things.
All right. So
Um,
to that end, we're gonna start rolling this train into the station here. If Dawson Harrington, if Mr. Harrington had carte blanche to do whatever he wanted to do to try to fix the national debt, what would you do? What would be your plan, or at least part of your plan, or a start of a plan? And you can think this through because it's important. We might have to turn to you to do this. So let's pretend that the whole weight of it falls on you. You've got carte blanche to figure it out. What would be the plan?
I got to be careful because if I take down the economy, I can never teach social studies again.
Oh, no.
I'll be out of a job.
Yeah.
So I think this gives me a chance to talk about two really important pieces we haven't hit yet.
Okay, hit me, please.
I think the military spending is an easy one to go after. And it's not necessarily even so much that we need to, maybe we need to cut their funding, but I think they could achieve what they're achieving at a lower rate of funding.
There is no doubt about it.
With the failed audits at the Pentagon and a lot of the waste we've seen, I think just generally applying the same due diligence we do to every other government agency
Yeah.
to the military could save a tremendous amount of money.
I don't deny that at all. In fact, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Dave, Kevin Kline. He becomes the president because he looks like the president. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's a
When I was really young.
there's a budget meeting. Oh, that makes me hurt. I think I got a little pain in my back when you said that. But there's a scene in the movie where he's doing like a budget meeting and trying to get money for something else. And he basically says, so you have contracts with the Navy for X number of billions of dollars, but they're not actually delivering the ships. And the guy's like, yeah. And it's kind of a funny moment. But then when you look it up, it's actually really, really true. All of it is like, you're spending $500 billion on this many ships, and they're not going to deliver for 3 years, or they might not deliver at all. You know what I'm saying?
The list of failed military contracts is endless. We've been trying to develop a new assault rifle for the Army for forever.
Yeah.
And, any number of things like that. And so that is a huge piece of it. I think could do a lot. The other one is trickier, and I don't know that there's an easy fix for it, but we do need to come to grips with what to do about Social Security.
Okay. Yeah.
There's a big debate. Sometimes you'll hear people say military spending is the biggest part. And some people will say Social Security spending is the biggest part.
Yeah.
And they're both kind of right. Military spending is easily the largest of our discretionary budget, what we can choose to spend on. Yeah. Social Security is the biggest entitlement program, what we have to. And the government has very little control over what they're paying out every year because it just depends on population.
Sure.
That removes a lot of wiggle room. And I think Social Security is super important. I don't even know that we should fund it less. I think we might just benefit from exploring alternative ways to fund it. Like going back to that sovereign wealth fund thing.
Yeah. I want to be part of that, by the way. Is there a way I can be part of the sovereign wealth fund? It sounds like it would be very nice.
Sure. Yeah. We would all be part of it. Just our taxes would be invested.
Not to be greedy, but just me. I just want to be part of them.
I see. Yeah. Okay. We can work that out for sure.
Okay.
I'll get in there.
Because it feels like that's like getting a black card, right? You could just, you can spend whatever you want on anything.
And then it goes back right into the U.S. economy. So,
right. All right. Well,
perfect.
So far, I like your plan a lot. The whole, I'm going to do an entire episode on Social Security and how that all works, because I don't think people really have a strong grasp. I don't think people know how much Social Security is getting touched by parts of the government in terms of getting money out of it.
Definitely. They don't talk about it much. I don't think they want to.
No, it's a very hush-hush, and I don't blame them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, well, you certainly have helped me at least a little bit. Again, my brain is not math-centric, so it's very difficult for me to figure this all out. But you've definitely helped me understand how it's impacting us. and that maybe we do want to keep a little bit of debt. I still am, my concern, it's one of those things, and before we go, it's like one of those things where the GDP thing, because I know more about the GDP because I studied it deeper for that episode. When we start talking about that you're 120% above the GDP, I don't know why that, I got like, oh my God, we are. And then I was like, wait, I don't even know what that means. Like, how does that affect anything? Which you helped to describe. I think you helped me understand a little bit, but I don't know why that number feels more important to me than the actual national debt. And am I wrong? I mean, it feels like that we want to have that number back like it was in, the 70s, the early 70s, where it was like 23% of the GDP was the national debt. I mean, it's for growth purposes at least, right? Am I wrong?
I mean, I think it's our tendency to go for like how we can relate to money, which I know for me is my household.
Yeah.
So when you look at it in those terms, that does effectively mean we're in more debt as a country than we're producing economically.
Right.
But I think it's that sort of separation between America, the country, and all of its corporate entities and the whole thing versus America, just the government.
Okay.
And just one last thing to end on that I think is kind of interesting that I learned today.
Mm-hmm.
I got kind of curious getting ready for this, if other countries had higher debt loads in terms of proportionality.
Yeah.
Ours is not as bad as you would expect compared to some other places.
Okay.
For example, Japan, their national debt is 230% of their GDP.
Wow,
which
really?
is shocking. Yeah, I had no idea.
But
They're having their own crisis with it. They're not.
And yet we borrow money from Japan, even though they owe money. Do they have the same kind of system where they owe money to themselves, or is?
I wouldn't be able to speak on that, but I do know that almost.
Come on,
every
you're supposed to be an
country
expert, Dawson. You're supposed to know every country in the world and how it all works.
That's how my students talk to me. God help me if I can't answer a question.
That's surprising. I would never have thought of that about Japan, just because they produce so much and they export so much. That's a crazy number.
Their equivalent of Social Security. It's a very similar problem to us. They're having trouble funding their essentially welfare apparatus.
So let me ask you. We'll go for a final answer here. Do anybody that we owe money to, whether it's ourselves or another country, expect that it's ever going to be paid back?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The second I think they stop expecting it to be paid back is when it will collapse.
Okay.
Which is kind of I know that sounds scary, but we do take great pains to make sure we pay that money back because it is so critical to us as as a government, basically.
Or to promise that we're going to pay it back, because basically the math is showing me here. If I had a ticker on my screen up here about what the national debt, remember there used to be one in Times Square, I think. I don't know if it's still there. There used to be a ticker of the national debt. But, if I'm looking at that, if we're paying it back, we ain't doing a good job of it because it just keeps going up.
No, not particularly. And I forget if I mentioned this. I don't remember. But part of it is that when we need to pay that debt back, whenever one of the bonds matures, we are apt to just issue a new bond to a different person and use that money to pay back the old one.
Oh, robbing from Peter to pay Paul, eh? Is that how we're working it?
Absolutely. I mean, would you feel more worried if you owed, let's say one person $100 million versus owing 100 million people $1?
That's a good question.
And I think it maybe takes some of the pressure off. But that said, maybe 100 million people is a lot of people to be mad at you. So
that's true. That's true. They can form a militia. Well, this has been wonderful. This has been very educational for me. I don't know that I fully grasp it, but you've done your best for certain to try to make an idiot understand. Dawson Harrington, is there anything you'd like to plug? I understand that you have some interest in Habitat for Humanity. That was one of the things that we talked about before. Talk a little bit about that if you could.
Absolutely. I'll always be a big advocate for Habitat for Humanity. On top of the actual material good they're doing by building the homes.
Yeah.
I think they are a really nice first step for people to start volunteering, because I think a lot of people would love to volunteer but aren't sure how to get involved.
Right.
And they make it tremendously easy. All you do is sign up and show up. No training needed. They've also begun operating Habitat for Humanity Restore, which are essentially donation-based home improvement stores.
Okay. And Habitat for Humanity is available state to state, right? Or is it even city by city? I'm not exactly sure.
I believe it's state to state, but I've never lived somewhere that they weren't reachable. And I've lived in some remote towns. So, they
Awesome.
are very prevalent.
What a great cause. Dawson, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate the time. You're friends with an idiot now, I'm sorry to tell you. But that's, that comes with the territory. So I apologize in advance. I'd love to have you back on. Anytime you have, we have some more financial questions to talk about, or not financial, but economic. Well, maybe even financial. Maybe if I want to talk to you about my personal bank account, we'll talk about that. But the big economic stuff, I'd love to have you back on if you're willing.
Thanks for having me. This was great. It's really nice just to be able to, yap.
Awesome. Dawson Harrington, everybody. All right, man.
Take care.
Take care. That does it for this time. Appreciate you listening. A reminder to click the follow button and drop us a review if you like what you're hearing. It helps us out a lot. You can also contact us at our email, hello@roughtumblemedia.com. That's hello@rufftumblemedia.com. Join me again for another episode of Assume I'm an Idiot. I'm your pal JR. Catch you again soon.